can actually watch our posting later on in the YouTube. And since we're actually recording, we actually have the ability to run Copilot, which is really kind of fun. And it's kind of interesting with the changes that are really happening. Welcome everyone to our Copilot 4 Essential Work Roles. And this is our third in our series on Copilot, and it's interesting to see how things have changed over the past couple months as Microsoft rolls out the new features. But really, Copilot is a very fascinating tool when you actually look at it to figure out how to actually think outside the box. That's really what I like to say about Copilot when I look at the pieces and everything else that we have. But those that are new to our webinar series, a little bit about KAMIND. Basically, we're a Microsoft managed partner. We're one of the 235 managed partners in the US. We're also a direct license reseller, and we're one of the 42 partners that an AOSG for GCC High partner. So we're really tied into, the Microsoft technologies and security, what's really happening. As far as ourselves, this has been 5th year running on the Inc. 5000 list, and have managed and migrated over 100,000 users and 400 companies to Office 365. And what's really interesting with the changes over the years when I look back is how AI has changed the environment and how we do things and how we use it. Primarily, our business at KAMIND, we're a licensed provider as well as a managed security service provider, specializing in the Microsoft security stack for both commercial and GCC High. And as part of our requirements in terms of supporting our GCC High environment, we also are going through our own CMC Level 2 certification for DOT, so we can actually provide those services to our clients that have those clauses, 7012 clause for those that are in the defense community. And the interesting thing about Copilot, and I'll bring it back to both for Azure Commercial and Azure Government, Copilot right now is available in Azure Commercial. In about another 3 to 6 months, you're going to find Copilot available in Azure Government. And it's really interesting in terms of what's happening. And it's really important that you get started. And part of the reasons when we look at Copilot and you look at AI tools in general, it's learning to basically how to use the tools in your business and which tools do you want to use. We've been routinely using the tools for ourselves in terms of understanding the features and functionality. And it's been really fascinating what works and what doesn't work. And as you go through, and what's with software in general, we're seeing constant improvement. To give you an idea about why this is really important, that you really need to adapt to a policy on it, is really understanding what's really happened in terms of the environment with AI. There's been a lot of hype on AI in terms of like what NVIDIA has been doing and everything else, but you just look in terms of what's happened in terms of the transition. When you look at like mobile phones for itself, you look at internet, and how fast ChatGPT has actually migrated. And those are aware is that Microsoft has a relationship with OpenAI, so whatever's in ChatGPT, Microsoft has full access to it. So it's really interesting to figure out how to actually leverage it. And as we look as organizations, it's surprising to see how much we are actually doing with the AI, and we really don't realize it. What this webinar is about is using Copilot. And yeah, there's a lot of pieces that we need to work on. It's not all the pieces are there, but it's really trying to understand one thing, how to use these tools in such a way to give ourselves a competitive edge. And I've noticed that myself, for instance, is when I start using Copilot-enabled tools or AI-enabled tools, I can actually do things faster. Things that would take me 1 to 2 hours to do, I can do them in an hour. So it's starting to learn how to actually roll in your personal productivity, but also from a security standpoint, since we're an MSSP, it's how we're actually using Copilot for security, which we'll have discussed in a future webinar, and how that actually will roll in the organization to help us make sure we secure our clients. In terms of also those in our commercial community for that we handle, but also those that are performing the mission for the warfighters. It's extremely important that we understand how we integrate these tools and really understand what we can do with them to leverage the skill sets we need to improve how fast we do things. Now, one thing I want to mention, this is really super important to understand about Microsoft value in terms of Copilot. Microsoft's philosophy is that data is your data. And why this is important, when you look at various types of tools on the web, some are free, some are not free, you pay for them, you have to pay attention to the license agreements. Because a lot of the license agreements will have you pay money to use their tool, but when you actually stop paying money, that means all the data and all the training that you put into that AI engine is now goes into the general community. So you need to be super, super careful in terms of which tool do things. Microsoft is very much adamant that the data is your data, and they basically will not fine tune anything to use the functional AI models. What they're doing is really building the AI model in your own tenant. And that fits in line with in terms of the protection strategy that KAMIND has, for instance. When we actually spin up a DoD tenant, for instance, for clients, we actually spin everything into the client environment. We do not share any of the data in our environment. We basically build out and instantiate them so they can stand alone. And that's all about trying to make sure the data maintained is owned by the client, not owned by the provider. So when you look at Copilot and you look at what AI is, it really is looking at this thing called large language model and the Microsoft and how the Microsoft has come up with what we call Microsoft Graph. And that's how it interrelates in terms of how we log in the systems, how we access our calendar, how we do email. All those features are actually maintained and can basically managed inside our tenant and kept for ourselves to use, and how we actually going to access the internet, for instance, and roll that in there. And of course, all the apps that we put in place. So when you look in terms of AI, when we look at it from like KAMIND and Microsoft Copilot, what we're looking at is saying that how can we leverage and use the information that we have in our SharePoint and our team sites, have in our SOWs, our statements of work, or our SOPs, our standard operating procedures. How can we actually use that to do it, to do work? So what we decided to do in this presentation is basically go through a product development cycle in terms of the various capabilities. And we're going to actually show you that in terms of how we actually build a data sheet, how we actually go through and build in terms of the financials associated, how we'd actually do a web page, for instance, and how we actually do in terms of the PowerPoint presentation. And granted, there's pros and cons and pieces. It's not all the AI components are there yet, but you can actually see them. And the reason why I kind of bring this up in these series, and we had a lot of questions internally as well, is why do we actually have this information? Because, there's a lot of, it's cool. It's some interesting tools and everything else, but some pieces are there or not there. It really comes down to what we call the prompt model. Doesn't matter if you use ChatGPT, it doesn't matter which AI tool you use. It's all about learning how to ask the questions. And I tune this more to think about how you actually think outside the box. Like in this example, it's really, you have to be very specific. Generate 3 to 5 bullet points to prepare me for, a client presentation, focus emails and Teams chat for information from our different sources. So you're looking at things as what's the goal you're trying to do? What's the content? Where's the source material is, and what is the expectation? And that's super, super important, because as you start using Copilot, people have this notion that AI is just going to do everything for you. But the reality is that you have to basically teach it. You have to basically put it into a model to understand how you do things. Like in my case, I'm dyslexic. I'm slightly dyslexic, as I say. But as those that have received emails from me, they say, well, I spell THE as TEH or something like that. And I don't really tell the difference of them. And I and E, I get vowels mixed up. What happens when I start running my data through Copilot, for instance, I'm actually looking and training it to catch those things in terms of my email responses and improve my communication. And the ironic thing is actually improving my time. But what you want to do when you talk about Copilot, it's understanding what you can do. And to do that, you need to experiment and you need to learn how to use prompting. Now, one of the things we talk about data, for instance, just keep in this mindset, the way Microsoft structured the AI engine that's being built in your 365 tenant is best is looking at this Venn diagram. Do you have the permission to see the content? Is the content been indexed by Copilot? Has your admin allowed it? Do you basically, what type of sensitivity label or security? And out of that, you get this small little circle of data. That's what's happening. So when you start thinking about AI, you think about using it, you're thinking about how do I actually make sure I have access to data and everything else. But you have to get started. So that's what we're going to try to do today. And there's a variety of different tools that you have. When you talk about the Microsoft 365 suites, you got co-authoring, you got how it actually managed in SharePoint sites, how it looks into your OneDrive, how teams are done, and data analytics. And you look through all those pieces in terms of trying to analyze what's going on into the environment. And we have this one piece we call the Microsoft Graph. And in terms of Microsoft Search, for instance, we're in the web searches. But the real thing is about data that's in the Microsoft Graph, which I'm pointing to. That's where all the information, logging in your system, your calendar invites, your Teams chat, all that information together. And what you're really trying to learn how to do is really understand Copilot and see what it is. So what we decided to do is to kind of make this and help you along the way. We came up with this new product release strategy. So we're going to walk you through a process of generating a data sheet, do a press release, do some costing with Excel, and then we have some non-static because of time for that. We'll show you like what you would do for a landing page and what you would actually do for a presentation. But that gives you kind of the idea and the pieces that we have. And what I like to do is I like to bring Mr. Chris Landis online, and I see him in here, and I will pass over the pen to him, and he can share a screen and basically give us a overview of how to walk through each of these various areas. Take it away, Chris.
What I've got open here is one of the things you need to if right now with Copilot you need to do it through your SharePoint and Teams. That's for the performance because it's doing a lot of work in the background. And what I've started is I'm going to show you two ways to get to the same thing. If you look on my browser, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, I've got Copilot open so I can chat with it. And there's a important difference between work and web. Now, I want it to look inside. I want it to look inside of our work environment to all of the data that we've stored internally. So I've toggled it to work because a huge difference if I look for Guard Plus on the web, well, it'll find different products. It'll look at the number of hits and it'll come back with something I don't want. So I really want it to look at just inside of the office of stuff. And I told it I want to write a product description of Guard Plus. And it's gone through all of the documents. In fact, it's even gone through a few emails and chats and come up with some ideas. And it gave me an option. Unfortunately, I went too fast here, but I'm going to show you over here actually how to do it from scratch. But it came back with a nice little response on a product description. But I am going to go over here and say, write a product description for Guard Plus. And I'm going to use the / and I'm going to reference it to the white paper that's actually quite a detailed document. I'm then have it click generate. And here we go. It looks for a template. So what it's doing is it's pulling a template, and then it's taking the data that I've gotten in the white paper. And the white paper is more written for a technical audience. This is a product description that we could then use and pass out to other people. As you can see, it's pretty quick. It's changed a lot of the words. It's put a better, I don't know how to say it. It's wrapped its English language around. And my native language is English, but I still struggle with a lot of words and making it professional and making it nice and beautiful. And here it's just doing it for me, using a template and putting it together. We've done some fun things like I mentioned, my native language is English. That said, if I wanted to have it write in a different tone, I could ask it to put it into a different tone. We've had a little fun around here, having it put in our favorite movie stars. I would not do that for professional document, but you can have it change its tone to be a bit more serious, to be more scientific. Um, if your audience happens to be, farmers wanting to do that, you could possibly put it into more agricultural industry terms. It's whoever your target audience is. Microsoft doesn't know at the moment, but if I wanted to, I could have it do that. So here, I don't know if you noticed at the beginning, the name of the document was it didn't have a name, so it's already named the document for me. And I can review this, I could make changes, I could ask it to insert a photo if I wanted to, and it's pretty nice for those people who are doing a lot of writing, but their skills aren't necessarily, you're not an editor and you're not a creative writer. It's done it for me. All right. The next thing I wanted to do, so we're going to go back here, and I'm going to start from scratch. New Word document. Now we're going to do a press release. Similar thing, so I'm having it do from scratch. Please, or I don't need to say please, I don't need to be polite. I can just say create for me a press release for Guard Plus. And I wanted to use the same original source document. I could have it over here, but I think this is so much easier. It's right there in the Word document. Let's see what it does. So you can go to the web and but in this case, Guard Plus isn't known. The product that we have isn't known on the web as much. You could have it go to the web. If you were trying to create something, you'd have to do a lot of editing. You can go to the web. So like if you don't even have that material, you could go out to the web and have it create the content for you. But we really wanted it to focus on what we have internally. And this document, I could take this, send it over to our marketing team, say, hey, what do you guys think? And she would go, great. That saved me a ton of time. She'd probably look through it. She wouldn't find any spelling errors because it does a really good job of that. She might want to change some of the focus, but it does a really, really good job there. The next thing, and I want to say that it is improving each month. They seem to be getting a little bit better on the product, so this is quite good for me. I don't, ChatGPT doesn't even most of them don't do this, and this is all internal. My information, because I'm keeping it to the work, all of this stuff is kept internal to our environment, like Matt has mentioned. So there's no loss of information going out. It's staying within the company. The next one I want to we've created a mock um, campaign cost analysis. So your Excel sheets probably are a lot bigger, and they do work on quite large Excel sheets. I ran it on another one, but for the purpose of the demo, is I've created uh, a a um, a budget for our campaigns. These are the campaigns we want to work on. These are the launch dates, the types of campaigns. This is what we've got budgeted for those campaigns and the projected revenue that we have on those campaigns. And last but not least, the total users. So what I will do with Excel, it's just a little bit different. I'm going to select the data. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to ask it. Now, I probably visually looking at this, I could probably figure out, for example, which campaign uh, will cost us the most. give it some time. You do have to select the area like you would. Oh, hold on. I think I need to redo this one, Matt. Let's see. Select that. Go over to Copilot. I think it was working on the previous one. There we go. There we go. So, this is a small Excel sheet. You can imagine that it would have been just as easy, but you can see it's came across with a surprising that it's actually done some effort. It said that the upsell from existing clients is in fact the most expensive. It's actually added the two together. And I know this isn't that impressive when it comes to a small Excel sheet. You could have figured this out yourself. But imagine you're dealing with thousands of rows and you're trying to figure out, based on this as your campaign, and they're listed twice, it's already figured out that this campaign is the most expensive one. All right, so it's done. You can see you can probably think through various combinations of things that you might want to do that would actually save you some time. And this is probably geared to those who aren't sort of Excel gurus. But I'm going to go for the next one. I'm going to ask it to create a new column. And I want to figure out calculate the cost per user. So I need to select that group again so that it knows it's going to look across the entire table. And we know that it should be basically the budget, that's our cost. And these are the users that we're going to be reaching. And it's going to tell me hopefully it's going to come back with the most expensive one so that we're just aware of that. And I can have it inserted. Sure, you might know how to do that, but it inserted the column for me. So there's the cost per user, and I can figure out that the Google one is going to be the most expensive one for us per user. Then if I want to, it does actually give you the option to look at other options, but I'm going to then select this again, and I'm just going to copy my existing one because I want to do the revenue, and that's going to happen. Create a new column that creates the revenue per user, and that should be the projected revenue divided by the users. Again, it's going to take that, and I can basically insert that column here as well. And it's done that for me. Now, this is easy on a small table. I could have just done it manually, but it's done it for me. It will give you other recommendations. How do I calculate, for example, return on investment is another possibility. And the last that I want to do is show you it can do a pie chart for you, as well as the pivot table that feeds that pie chart. These are things common English language is used. You could then give this to a non-Excel expert, sort of a novice user, and they should then be able to calculate these things for you. There you go. It's done the ROI for me. And if I want to, I will then just simply ask it to create a pie chart. I'm going to ask it really blankly as if I didn't know what pie chart I wanted. Can you create a pie chart? So it's decided that this one is the one that I wanted. If I wanted to, it'll start, once it starts looking at the data, it gives you more options to look at. I'm going to add the new sheet. And it should be putting it, there we go. It should be putting those across. It's done that. If I wanted to do campaign with average ROIs, it's going to look at those as well with ROI higher than 17%. It's quite sweet, and it's getting better each time I come back to it. It's maturing. Their product is getting a lot better. So I would definitely recommend, again, if I want, I can add this to a new sheet. I'm not a budgeting finance expert, but I think you can see for handing this over to a fairly novice person or a person with a lot of stress, it will do a lot of the back work that they may not know how to do. Is there any questions about those documents that I created?
Hmm. Well, Chris, yeah, thank you. We'll have some open sessions for questions at the end. I appreciate the demo and everything else. It's really interesting when you look at Copilot and what Chris has done. It's it's about learning and it's about trying to improve skill sets. And I put some few things in the chat just so to keep aware of it. It takes what we've been finding, it takes a couple months to basically start building the indexing and learning it. It's not something you're going to turn on and do immediately. It's like you have to learn how to use prompting. So when we talk about Copilot and everything else, the recommendation is start with a small team and then figure out what the strategy is, how you want to actually run the productivity in your organization. But to this quick summary in terms of what we did, I have some slides in the deck. They'll be available here. It's like in terms of what Chris did in terms of the process of prompting that he actually learned how to do in terms of putting the data in the sheet, go asking questions about it, which is basically learning the prompts and figuring out what the pieces you need to do. That's how you actually start looking at the information you have and what I call thinking outside the box. Now, there's all sorts of other things you can do as well. I mean, we didn't have time to go through a larger demo, for instance, on the Video Studio Code with GitHub. For instance, here's like using like the chat function to actually in GitHub to actually write the code and put the pieces in place so that you can actually get a landing page built basically in a few minutes using the right scripting and using the right, and it's not scripting, I was incorrect on that, but using the right language requests. That's the secret. So when you start using the things, it start looking at ways to make things work. But at the same time, you have to be careful too, because you have to make sure you understand the material that you have. Like one example that we didn't want to have a demo for this, but we had like this Guard Plus overview session. Guard Plus, for those who are not aware of, it's a security audit tool that we actually have to validate our implementation. So what we did in this specific case is start with a very generic PowerPoint presentation and basically said, okay, go build me a slide set from that introduction slides and see what would happen. Now, there's a lot of work associated with it, and there's not that much data, but you start building framework of presentations. But what you're doing, and then you start asking questions to basically modify it. But what you're trying to do with Copilot, especially in this early phase availability, is you're trying to build it out into your tenant and get the pieces in place. And then what you want to do is really educate yourself in terms of how you do prompting. Now, Guard Plus is a cybersecurity product. Now, there's also other products in the market for Guard Plus as well. So when you actually look at it, this is what happens when you actually do a presentation if you're not specific in the prompt. Now, this is suddenly talking about doing comprehensive security systems and everything else associated, which is not Guard Plus. So you see, you have to, but if you start getting specific in terms of what you're looking for, using information, you can actually build the necessary documents. Like what we did here is we have our statement of work in terms of how we do a Guard onboarding for our clients that have Guard services. So it's very clear is that we're trying to do. We want to create a presentation from our onboarding SOP with the value of cybersecurity services using Microsoft Security Software 365 E3 plus the Security E5 suites in a simple introduction cybersecurity graphics and a slide. So Copilot generated that. And then you have a presentation that's built around it. That's the things that you're trying to do. So as you work into your business processes, you're trying to understand the pieces to give you that competitive advantage. And the aspect is, and that's really at this point in time, that's what you're trying to do with Copilot. What Chris has done in terms of like the features, he even noticed that as he tried different demos that they worked early in January versus how they worked in February, how they work in March, it's changed it. There's constant enhancements that's going through. So keep that in mind. But the real thing is you need to actually seriously look about how do you actually want to use something in your environment. And the thing about to keep in mind in terms of the Microsoft Strategy Copilot, it's basically the data is your data, so it resides in your tenant. So you don't get caught in the situation where you actually bought a license from a third party, for instance, and then you suddenly stop paying for it, that your data all becomes subject and basically incorporated in the other model. So the Microsoft flavors of Copilot that actually we have a lot in terms of GitHub that Chris is using. You have the free in terms of the web Copilot. I published it in the chat earlier that you can actually go to copilot.microsoft.com and just sign in with your work account so you can actually use the services. You have how Chris is showing you how it fits in Word, how Excel and PowerPoints. We're seeing in Teams as well. The Teams is really super important. There, business chat that's actually coming through in terms of some of the what we call the Copilot Studio. And you have Windows Copilot. It's like the new Windows laptop 6s, which we just have some on order for ourselves, actually have AI chipsets built into it. So there's a lot of things going on, and you have to basically look at what it means to you and your business. And you want to look in terms of how it manages from the metrics. So before you actually go through and you basically look and saying that, oh, we're going to buy for the organization or whatever, it really is a one that you basically have to try this, build out the infrastructure, put the necessary controls in place, and then basically look at how that supports the workflow and what role and function to take advantage of it. But, keep in mind is that as you look for different services and how users are doing things, is you need to basically address what your users want to do, because otherwise they're going to put a third-party product and you're going to have data leakage in your environment, which is really not good. So how do you get started? Well, it's very easy. Like I said in the chat earlier, get a team of 4 to 6 people, deploy 4 to 6 Microsoft Copilot license, and start learning to think outside the box. And what Microsoft has done, they have also in terms of Copilot Lab, for instance, to help you actually learn how to prompt. And prompting is super important because that's how you're going to get the various pieces and understand what it actually makes sense, and learning how to actually look at examples of things and how to be more specific. As you saw in Chris's demo, he was going through Copilot and he was looking in terms of how to actually tweak his responses, how to add that column, how to do those averages. Those are the things that you need to learn and learn how to actually do. And it's the time to do that is really now. And so what is the best way to do is I'd say is, let's start today. Download, we have our white paper, go to kamind.com/feedback and basically put a request in there. We'll send you our Copilot white paper to help you get started. And it's really the next step is purchase some Copilot license. You can have us deploy them. We'll basically assign them for users with you and then start using it. We have a lot of videos that we posted in terms of YouTubes, in terms of our webinars, and we're going to post some additional small videos as well. And if you're a KAMIND licensed customer, as part of our CSP agreements with you, we automatically provide you a Teams integrated a learning management system. And then we have also pushed out through that as Copilot. So you can actually, there's multiple ways to get started, but it's up to you. The real challenge is how do you actually start getting learning to get that competitive advantage? So with that, I'd like to open up for questions and see if there's any questions that folks have, and then we can get those addressed. One of the questions that folks ask me sometimes is there's different cost versions of Copilot. And in Microsoft, if you have let's say a Microsoft Live account and you want a personal version of Copilot, there's a $20 version of Copilot that you use that's tied with your Microsoft Live account. Just like there's Copilot for security, which we're actually deploying internally with KAMIND, as well as some of our security products. And you also have the sales for Copilot and some dynamic service for Copilot, a bunch of different versions of plugins. So it's really interesting to see how things are going to expand and change.
I think, Matt, one of the things that's good, especially with the Excel sheet example, is in our case, that was a mocked up Excel sheet. There wasn't anything confidential in that, but there are some little tools that you could download and plug into it, which we do not recommend people doing with OpenAI to enable that. The difference here is if you have sensitive data in that Excel sheet, that data is staying inside of your tenant. It's not going anywhere. They guarantee it. You can then run those, run Copilot on it to analyze it to help you understand your own data a bit better. That's one of the powers of it. And you have the peace of mind knowing it's not leaving your tenant. Whereas if you're using one of these third parties or trying to use one of these third parties that are really cheap or free, there's a reason why they're cheap and free. It's because they're taking your data and adding it to their data, and they're going to resell it. With Copilot, that's not happening.
That's a very good point. And because especially with all the organizations, everything that we're looking at, it's data protection because especially today, data protection and data ownership are the assets of the business. And we have to do our best to make sure those assets are maintained. Well, we'll give one last chance if anyone has any questions or if they want to speak up or put it into the chat session. And if we don't have any questions, then we're going to give you all 10 minutes back. I guess with that, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And this is going to be posted on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please basically go subscribe to it. And seriously, if you're looking at it, thinking about it, or using some of the Chat GPT, please take advantage and get a couple licenses put in place and start building out the environment. It takes about a couple months before you fully index data. And you want to basically get ahead of the curve because if you do this 3 months from now, you're still going to have that time period. So get ahead of the curve and start building the environment and start learning how to prompt. With that, I will thank you very much for your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you at another KAMIND webinar.